Top of the middle of the day to you, ladies and gentlemen. We're at the bench in the shop for another little narrative session. We're going to talk about the MaxFlow air cleaner system. Throwing the disclaimers out right off the bat. This is a narrative. I'm only human. I make mistakes in this process. Check the description for any clarifications, qualifications, or corrections. I try to use that area to get to the bottom of when I make mistakes, and my contact information is generally in there as well. So if we think about the concept, this is a system that's designed, and it was from an area that is pretty dusty. That's why he developed it, and it's for the pro size, older pro size, bigger saws. Generally, I haven't seen any of these kits that work on any of the smaller saws other than like the 044. That's the smallest I've ever seen. There's nothing printed on the side of this. It talks about the options that you can get with this. So it goes from 084. They have an 088 version. Same one basically, down to the 044. That was the saw that was available when this stuff was being developed. It's now the MS440. That saw is no longer in production either, but technically that's kind of where it started the process. Okay, so we got the little bit of the history out of the way. I guess we'll look at what's inside the bag real quick. So there's a cage, basically. That's this part right here. There's going to be a nut plate, which is this part right here. There's actually, this would be technically, I guess, maybe the nut plate. There's two versions of this. This is what you put inside the filter. This goes on the outside and holds the filter on. If you want to run it in an application where you're not running the rain cover, sometimes in the summer months, guys will run these out in the open. They won't use the cover. This would be what holds the cage and the element onto the carb box cover or filter base, however you want to refer to that part of the equation. We have a green element, which is a 60 pour, and there's a 80 pour white element in there as well. So in extreme fine particulate dust conditions, guys using the white one generally. That's what I've seen and done. So if we look on the back a little bit, we can see some information here. All this information, the CFM numbers came from testing on FlowBench, so it's not random. We thought about it and put some numbers down. We actually can verify that these are accurate. So the MaxFlow system increases available airflow by 305%. 2 days of cutting without cleaning is what it says. I personally know that you can run them in a pretty dusty application for 2.5 days. I tested it out myself several times. 2.5 days is pretty much maximum. They're starting to run really rich at that point. But definitely that's not an erroneous statement by any stretch of the imagination. The 4-inch green weenie increases available airflow by 178%. And that comes in at 111 CFM. If we look at the steel heavy duty filter, which there's a couple versions. I'm thinking that stuff was tested with this version of the air filter, not the new cartridge style. This is some kind of a polyamide base material that they're using. From what I understand, it doesn't do very well. I know a lot of saws have come in my shop where they've peppered the back of the skirts because stuff's getting by using these right here. It could be getting by right in this area, but stuff gets by. The premise is, I think, that they don't even actually work good until they get a little clogged up, and then they get a little bit of backflow onto them. Maybe, I think you can oil these. I've never done it personally. It might help the experience. I don't use these really. I prefer a different style. We'll look at that in a minute. Anyway, heavy duty, new, no oil. They do 89 CFM. If you look at this, it was clean, it was oiled, and then you cut for half of a day, 77 CFM. So it drops quite a bit in a half a day's worth of time. Now, full throttle airflow is 58 CFM. As far as I know, that was on an 084. Smaller saws aren't going to require that much air because they're not pulling that much through. That was on a stock saw, as far as I know. Zip saws are going to be pulling more than that, obviously. So, guy needs to think about some of those things. But basically, 300 times longer it'll last, I guess, under dirty and harsh conditions than, say, the standard HD2 style element. Now, I've run these in a burn. Burns are about as bad as you can get, and you can make it for a whole day. Generally, it's not optimum necessarily, but you can pretty much tough it out for the whole day. Some of the Husqvarna models, like my 390, you're cleaning that thing every 2 hours probably. I would say that's a stretch right there. I've tried the Dolmar heavy duty elements in a burn, and that's 2 hours is pushing it very much, and you're basically taking a film of grease and lubing around the base where it makes contact with the bellows, or you're sucking stuff by there. So definitely a better system than what's going on with the stock. Now, just for throwbacks, this is an 084 air filter element. You can see the big pleats in them, a lot of surface area. It's the same exact size as the HD2. They made up a little bit different. The rubber's in the carb box, or the carb box cover of the filter base, but same concept, but a lot more surface area. I ran these quite a bit. You can run a couple of them, clean them at halftime. They actually do pretty good. I wanted to actually talk about the element itself, and so I'm going to pull out my 084 kit right here. If we take a look, this is what it looks like with the cage and the nut plate inside. You can see there's a lot of area for air to get in there, which is pretty sweet. A guy has to make sure that he has the cage centered in the element. I've seen where guys end up letting stuff get by these because they don't have the cage centered in there. As you can see, it's hanging down a little bit. The element's hanging a little bit down right here on this backside, and that'll give you grief once this gets plugged up. So guys got to be super careful to make sure and get the element centered on the cage. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about, which I don't know who out there may or may not know, and I don't know if you can see these or not, but I'm hoping that you can see what's going on here. So some of the filter from the process, the manufacturing process, the cutting, essentially cutting it out, you get little fine pieces of it. Now, what I do personally every single time is I invert the element and I blow it out with the air hose. That's what I do. And the reason I do that is because you're getting rid of all those little shavings that are left in there from the manufacturing process. Now, I know that they blow these out because they don't all come like that. I'm hoping that you can see that big tuft right there. Every once in a while, you have to deal with it, but because I've seen it a few times from using these over a lot of years, I do it every time. So I'm making that recommendation, if you install one of these yourself, that you invert the element and blow the thing off. Now, for me personally, I've tried a lot of different oils in conjunction with filters like this, clear back from my motorcycle racing days, motocross, whatever. back in the early 80s, they had 3-stage filters. Well, you could get 3-stage filters. I've tried Bel Ray. I've tried the Maxima stuff. You can't run, I'm not going to get it out of there. I've tried CalGuard. I've tried all kinds of different ones. I think that this particular brand is the best by far, and it's 2 reasons. It's lightweight oil, like what you see with a K&N. It's kind of a lightweight oil, but it's still super tacky. So it's going to allow the air to actually get through. I don't like the stuff that comes out and ends up like snot on your air filter. That's my personal preference. I think if you're going to be in a sandy, super nasty situation and you're going to clean it really often, it might be a little bit better. I don't know. I've never had a problem with this oil, and I've been using it for a long, long time. Yeah, long time. Now, the custom paper plate operation, I have these in the shop because I put them down and soak up the oil from the saws. But we're going to use it here because I generally oil this element over the garbage can. But we're going to do it for the viewing pleasure today right here. So, shake it up a little bit, and I go right around the inside, personally. I want to get that inside of this corner right here well saturated, since this is the sealing surface. Now this stuff comes out really cold, so you have to be careful when you put it on your element that you don't rip your element once you try to put the cage inside there. I've never actually done that, but I could see where it could be a problem. And you can see I'm doing a pretty good job getting it saturated. Hopefully I'm not spraying everything on the bench with the overspray from this operation, because this stuff is kind of impressive to get off. So then basically you're going to like kind of work it in a little bit. Sometimes it's better to wait. But I kind of just start right away. A lot of times I end up using my other hand. So sometimes wearing 2 gloves is really good, but today for viewing pleasure situation, I'm not doing that. And what I'm trying to reach is essentially a saturation point with this process, so that when you get your G.I. Joe Kung Fu grip involved with working the oil into the filter, I'm thinking that you can see that the excess is coming off. So I basically work it in until it just comes off like that. I'm not actually trying to crush the element. I'm just trying to like get it to have the excess so it comes off. So the other side of the equation is getting the cage in there. Again, the nut plate goes on the back. And I'm actually being kind of careful as I'm putting the element in there. And I'm looking at the back side to see how the alignment goes. I can see my filter's offset in there. So then we have to make an adjustment. Again, it's imperative that the lip, that this lip right here is inside the perimeter of the cage, so that when it mates up to the filter base, you get a good seal right there. And it might take a little bit to get it worked in there, but it's the way it goes sometimes. Good things come to those who wait. So that's essentially what we're talking about for me. Then I will install this on the particular saw. So now I'm cleaning up a little bit here. One of the things I think that is kind of cool as an alternate in this process that I don't think a lot of people have realized or come up with on their own necessarily, you can use this is essentially the same concept. It's the winter version. So it has a super fine mesh screen. I'm thinking that you can see through it. Back there you can see, even though you're looking on green, you can see that it allows a lot more air to get through than the standard system. Now again, winter, this is the winter version. It is not something a guy would want to try to use in a summer application, unless you're in the rainforest maybe. It's definitely not for dust. And I will do something that's kind of interesting. And I will use this as the cage sometimes. Because you have a second wave of filtration, if you will. Now, I didn't oil this one up because I'm going to take it back off anyway. But essentially, you can use that as your cage. Now, it'll probably slow the airflow down a little bit, but it's going to act as a secondary filtration medium because sometimes you get rips in these. It's just the way it works. I mean, you can see a little tiny one right here, and that came out of the box like that from the manufacturing process. Sometimes you'll get a little tear in them. So it's kind of an interesting concept. One thing that you have to be super careful of, though, because I've had this happen as well. I built a saw for a guy, and he was running one of these, and he let this he ran it for a long, long time, evidently, and it ended up separating, and he pulled a piece of this mesh through his saw, and wide open throttle and metal going into the intake equals catastrophic meltdown situation, or just catastrophic destruction. Nothing really melted down technically, but definitely roached the whole top end. So that's a little trick that a guy can use if he so desires. If we get back on the paperwork side of it a little bit, they have a nice presentation here. Talks about what's available, gives a little bit of history, a little bit about what's inside there. Here we go. You can see the cage like I was showing here. You can see the backing plate or the nut plate. If a guy wants to run it without the rain cover in the summer, this is what you can end up doing. So, I don't know. They're a super awesome alternative. They do a little bit better performance-wise. They definitely last a lot longer when you're running your machine. If changing out your air cleaner is a issue, which sometimes I think that's probably the case, you get a lot more time out of the MaxFlow system. As I was packing everything up, of course, I remembered an interesting little tidbit and thought I might splice this in. So the original rain cover that was involved in this process in the R&D phase of the development was an old Clorox bleach bottle bottom. So improvisation was part of the equation in the development as he was trying to get to that place of having something super sweet, which the rain cover, if you think about what's going on with these now, is pretty super sweet, all things considered. Alrighty, so I think I kind of covered what I was trying to get at with this session here. I hope you found a little nugget of information that was new. I hope that the process was interesting. I do appreciate you taking the time to stop by and watch my small offerings in this YouTube experience. And so I'm hopeful that you're going to have a blessed day wherever you might be on God's green earth.